Hi, welcome to the Aston Barclay podcast. My name is Ben Crawford, and you join me sat here with Martin Potter, Chief Customer Officer of Aston Barclay. Welcome, Martin.
Hi, Ben.
We're here today to talk about the latest Aston Barclay Quarterly Insight Report, this time reflecting on the first quarter of 2022. We're now seeing the market shift after rallying for so long, with book prices falling 3 times consecutively across all categories. Aston Barclay's experience has been slightly different, with prices continuing to rise versus Q4 2021 in most cases. Martin, can you tell us a little bit more about what we've seen during the last quarter?
Yeah, I can. I mean, obviously, it's a moving market, as you said. We have seen consecutive cap book drops January through to March, and I think that looks like, I had a call with them this morning, so that looks like that's continuing as well into Q2.
Oh, right.
I think we're looking at probably another drop in the April to May book of probably, on the 3-year 60,000, probably another 2.1, 2.3%. But I think that was in line with what they said at the beginning of the year. To be honest, CAP did say that they felt the prices for this year may drop collectively over the 12-month period by perhaps 15%. But when you think, as we reported in Q4, a number of our sectors were anywhere between, I think at the lowest was 30-some-odd%, some were 40-odd% increase, some were even 60 in that certainly old part exchange sector.
Yeah.
So even though we are seeing sort of small book drops each month, and even if it is 15% by the end of the year, that's not going to break into the massive increases that we saw over the last 12 or 18 months. So no major crisis, if you like, but definitely a change in what we've seen in the last 18 months with continual growth, although, as we'll get into, our Q1 data we're very pleased with, because we have actually bucked that trend and seen an increase in most of our sectors in that first quarter, despite book drops every month. But yeah, I think the market has definitely changed. Consumer appetite is waning through all the energy prices and everything else, of course. So yeah, there's lots for everybody to consider in the market. So hopefully they'll find the podcast really useful today.
Hopefully so. Looking ahead into the rest of the year, the new vehicle supply issues continue to dominate the outlook, not helped with the war in Ukraine, which has happened since the last time we spoke. It only happened in February. We're seeing the European manufacturers specifically struggle to source components, with instances of very large orders, you said yesterday, being cancelled outright with no alternative plan, which is in turn is having a big effect on the new car registrations, which we've seen from the data in the report from SMMT.
Yes.
What's your view then on the rest of the year? Then do you think this will continue to play out?
Yeah, I think it's going to be something for the whole of the year and into next year, actually. And unfortunately, nobody has all the answers, but you're right. I think the SMT data that's in the Insight report for March showed sort of 14% down on year, and let's remember last year March everywhere was still locked down. Retail didn't open up to the 12th of April, I think, last year from memory. So actually that's 14% down on something that was already very low. The thing I noticed that was really significant was sort of fleet registrations were down by sort of 34% year-on-year comparison. So as we know, anything that is being produced new is all being fed into the retail franchise network, and even those are still significantly lower than what they would like to have based on their order books. So yes, I think, and with Ukraine, I think it's been well documented. People like VW and BMW have clearly stated that they have a lot of their wiring looms and stuff from Ukraine. So that's actually hit a couple of the European manufacturers very hard. And I have had reports of large order books being cancelled because the manufacturer just doesn't know when they're going to be able to satisfy that order. So yeah, I think it's with the Ukraine situation, it's just exacerbated that situation of when will that new volume come in any great supply, and we still don't know. Each manufacturer has a different strategy and how they're working through it, and I guess we're going to have to sit tight and just see how that works over the next few quarters. Most people obviously did say that they would see that production coming back second half of the year, so we've still got another quarter till we get to that point. But I do think actually with the recent updates, I would suggest it's likely to extend that process rather than help it become a shorter process. So yeah, I think we're in for that type of situation for quite some months yet.
Yeah, because of course when the predictions were made, there was no war in Ukraine.
No, exactly right. Yeah, exactly right.
one thing from the SMMT data that we've seen, and I think it was something that was always predicted, was the big rise of battery electric vehicles, the number of registrations up this quarter by 79%, which is huge. I think it seems that whilst we always anticipated that the number of new registrations in that product would go up quickly, it seems that they're probably gathering speed because the manufacturers are prioritising that vehicle over the diesel and the petrol product, because that's the way that it's going. And by 2025, there are no new registrations for pure fossil fuel based vehicles.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, I think that's an ongoing trend, and I think also that's been slightly exacerbated by most of the manufacturers for several reasons. If they are going to produce a car, they tend to be producing the battery electric or hybrid vehicles, A, because I think they've got more margin in them, but B, because that also suits the cafe fine situation with the emissions. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword. So a lot of what the manufacturers are producing is that sector as well. So I think there's a mixture of, yes, the demand is there for that, but actually that's also what the manufacturers have to supply as well. So maybe slightly exacerbated by that. But yeah, the general trend, as we've seen for many quarters now, is certainly more hybrid and battery electric vehicles being registered, without a doubt. Obviously, that doesn't yet reflect in the wholesale market because it's still a very small proportion, but that is growing exponentially, and we see that changing in the next 12 to 18 months. The mix of combustion engine with hybrid, plug-in and multi-hybrid and pure battery electric is going to change quite dramatically over the next couple of years.
Yeah, and the new registrations is just a leading indicator for us about what's coming down the pipeline.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Let's talk then about specific age profiles of vehicles then. So first up is late and low, which is the 0 to 24 month product and the one impacted most by the new car supply drought. What's the story here then, Martin?
Yeah, so Q1, we're really pleased actually, as we've said. Book prices across all sectors actually have been dropping every month, Jan through March. So my sort of gut expectation was that actually when we ran these reports, we might just see a slight decrease in values, but I think that's only happened in one sector, which we'll get to. So yeah, the late and low sector has risen by sort of 1.2% quarter on quarter. And finished at an average value of sort of 23,265, which is the highest we've seen for the last 2 years, which is fantastic. In monetary value, that was an increase of about £284 quarter on quarter. And I think this sector still has demand in it because obviously, as we've just said, because there's so little new car supply, then obviously the hunger and demand for the late and low sector is still high. And I think because a number of people as well, we saw about a 10% less of that volume compared to Q4 in Q1. So that also may well have been a reason why the prices went up slightly, because demand was still there and supply was slightly shorter. But I think a lot of that's also because a lot of the rental volume's not coming out because they can't get a new replacement to take it out, so they're running their fleets a little longer. But yeah, still great demand in that sector, and the sort of age was still on average about 14 months old and about 11,000 miles, so not too significant change in age and mileage, but good to see a slight increase. And when you compare that from a year-on-year perspective, those cars were actually only worth sort of 14.6, similar sort of age and mileage profile, and now they're 23.2. So you can see in a year how much they've gone up. So as we've just said, even if there are consecutive book drops over the next few months while there's a little bit of softening of the market, we're never going to get back to a situation where you're going to strip another 9,000 out of that average value. So even though we will get some monthly sort of drops of maybe 1 or 2%, that market's still got lots of strength in it. Yeah.
And even though we've seen the average age and the average mileage of that product drop, it's not equivalent from going from 14.6 to 23.2, is it? It's there's plenty of value in that product.
Yeah, because if you go year on year, yes, the average mileage was 16 instead of 11, and the average age was sort of 17 months instead of 14. So yes, it's slightly changed, and that will have had some effect on why the value's gone up.
Yeah.
But they're not so different that it would be representative of somewhere in the region of best part of probably 60-odd% rise year on year.
Yeah, exactly. Next up is the fleet product then, which we've spoken about a bit about already. That's the 24 to 54 months. age category. We've seen a big drop in the volume of this profile as well, down 14% as leasing contracts continue to be extended. But more price rises in this category.
Yeah, I'm really pleased actually that it is only 14%, because I know most fleets will resonate, those that are listening, that I think it's quite common that most fleet companies are running at somewhere in the region of about a 34-35% extension rate at the moment, again for the same reasons that new car supply is not available to them. All of the leasing companies are reporting very big order banks of almost a year's worth of orders in place already. So actually, when you think that those 30% weren't due to come out, I think, again, to only be 14% behind, we've kind of bridged that gap in that volume. So I'm still quite pleased where that's sitting. Mm-hmm. And you're right. In terms of pricing, again, quarter on quarter. So in Q1, we ended up at sort of 15,683 as an average value, with vehicles that were about 40.4 months old. Yes, mileage is still dropping, which is the trend since the pandemic. Mileage dropping to just early 30,000, which is probably the lowest we've seen it as well in that sector, but that's not unusual. That's been an ongoing trend. And that represented some of the reasons, sort of about £150 worth of increase quarter on quarter. But again, year on year, it's still amazingly huge in terms of, was 10,400 in January 21, or end of Q1 21, I should say. And we finished with a 15,683 at the end of Q1 2022. So again, over the course of the last 12 months, almost a sort of 50% increase in average values, 50.6 to be precise. So again, very healthy.
Yeah.
So yeah, very pleased.
Then we have dealer young, which for us is 55 to 75 months. And this is the only area where we've seen prices fall for the first time in a year.
Yeah, and I think, though, put it in perspective, because, again, this marketplace has been exceptional. I think we reported in Q4 21 that sector in the space of the year of 2021 had risen by well over 60% in terms of average values. We started Q1 21, this price bracket was only £7,000. And despite the fact that Q1 saw it drop back to an average value of sort of 10,800, that is on cars that have an average age of about 66 months. And the mileage actually increased in the quarter, which is representative why some of the pricing has dropped a little, because the cars are slightly older at 66 as opposed to 65 at Q4 21. And the mileage has crept up from sort of 56 to almost 60. So the age mileage profile is the reason why some of that pricing has come down slightly. But again, still very healthy. Like I say, that market sector was at 7,000 a year ago, and we're still now at an average of 10,800. And I think we probably stated last quarter, the reason why that sector is still so popular is because retailers are trying to search for that value range product, so that if it's about that 10,800, 11,000 wholesale price, it'll be sitting somewhere in the region of that sort of 12,995 retail, and that's a real sweet spot, I think, for retailers, where they can sell that product relatively quickly. So it's still in high demand across all of our buying retailers.
Yep. Then we've got dealer old, which is 78 to 125 months, with price and mileage remaining pretty consistent, but age dropping away by about a month and a half. This is the most consistent we've got, I think, out of all the different categories.
Yeah, I agree. And I think when you start to look, that's up to just over 10-year-old stock. Average age for the whole arena is sort of still sitting at around that 101 months old. Mileage has crept up again in the just slightly quarter on quarter, but not too much. But again, I think when you look back a year ago, the average price of that sector of cars was only sort of £3,700. Now, end of Q1, it's 5,665. It's still quite incredible how that sector's moved, and still shows you why the reason for that again is that exactly the same as the previous sector, really, that retailers are still looking for value product. Consumers are obviously looking for value products, and I think with the recent situation with the fuel prices going up and home energy pricing going up, consumers we may well see even more demand in these areas as people try and maybe look to change their vehicles for almost a downgrade in value to try and release some equity in their current vehicle to stave off any of those effects on their actual disposable monthly income. So I think that's a sector to watch in the next quarter, actually, to see if the appetite grows still further for those two sort of valuable sectors. Yeah.
And then the last profile we've got is the budget, which is more than 126 months old. We spoke about this last time as being the product you could set your watch by. It was constant as gravity, £1,200. You could get yourself an older car, but it's now topped £2,000, unbelievably. I suppose the cost of motoring is just at an all-time high at the minute. What do you think is leading this rally?
Yeah, I'm really pleased with this sector, actually, because, like you say, for years and years and years, it has been £1,200, and we've been seeing it growing. We thought last quarter at £1,800 it might have reached its peak, and obviously not. And when you think the average age of this product is actually 165 months, even though it says it's 126 months plus, it's actually sitting at 165 months with a sort of average mileage somewhere in the region of almost sort of 97, 98,000. It's quite incredible. But again, I think it just says that actually people are looking for that. Initially it was people not wanting to return maybe to public transport and have a cheap vehicle just to get to the train, either to the train station or actually to go to work and not take the train or the bus. But I actually think now, for the same reasons as people are looking at their disposable income, maybe this is an area where people are looking for a cheaper vehicle to run around in. And obviously it has still been in demand. And I think actually this sector suffered quite some big drops by the books in the last quarter, actually, because this sector we saw rising quite well over the previous quarter at the end of last year. This year it's taken quite a big hit. So I'm really pleased that whilst the books have dropped in that sector, our average pricing has actually increased. So it's a real bucking the trend sector. And that's probably despite the fact that there is a little bit more of that volume around, because retailers are retaining some of their own mid-range value product that they would have previously sent to auction. We're getting sort of that secondary part exchange, which is slightly lower value. So that's risen despite the fact that there's probably a bit more of that volume in the marketplace as well, which is really good to see.
And it's probably helped by the fact that this is the precise product that is run through our lanes physically. We've been really clear that the dealer auction should be physical, so that people can look at these cars, and see what they're buying, getting into it. And it's the type of product that's maybe a bit more difficult to buy online in an online-only auction.
Yeah, and I think all those last three sectors, that's relevant then, actually, because, as you know, we run physical and online auctions for all of our dealer sales across all of the network, and we took that decision back in April. And I think that really has helped us, because the retailers have reacted. We've got record attendances at those sales. Our conversions against our peers seem to be much higher. And you're right, I think it's product that lends itself to be still being seen, heard, because they are older. But as you've seen from the values, they're not. You're ranging from £2,000 to £11,000 in that sector. I think it's been really important that we've enabled the buying audience and reacted to what they asked for, which was the ability to come and see those vehicles being run through. And I think that's held us in good stead. And I think that might be the reason why we have perhaps bucked the market trend by having increases in the majority of those sectors quarter on quarter, where the market has reported drops every month. We've seen rises. So that's really good. Yeah.
Let's look now at fuel profiles, because we recognise that battery electric vehicles and hybrids are such different products. We originally lumped them together in alternative fuel vehicles, but now we've split them apart, which has shown that hybrids continue to remain pretty stable, actually, while the battery electric products just continues to grow and grow as newer vehicles make it through to auction, and they get more and more advanced all the time.
Yeah, and I think just to remind people, the reason we split this out was that there's definitely two different marketplaces with battery electric. We used to put them all together, like you say, as all alternative fuel vehicles. And in the last 3 quarters, we've separated it out for good reason, because I think hybrid product's been around a lot longer than the battery electric. The average age mileage profile for the hybrids is very similar to the fleet sector, around that sort of 40 months and 30-odd thousand miles, with sort of average prices around that 18,000 mark. And when we joined them together, it actually gave the wrong impression about the alternative fuel. So to split them out has been the right thing to do. And as you say, battery electric vehicle, while still a very small of a proportion of our overall sold volume. As I've said, that is growing, and again, this quarter it's gone up massively. It was sitting on average at sort of 25,300 end of last year, and the end of Q1 this year, that's jumped to 28,060. So, yeah, still big demand for that product. I think, obviously, everything in the news is about consumers looking to say, well, actually, what do I need to be doing over my next phase of my driving? Do I need to be looking at hybrid and battery electric? And I think what's happened is that, I think I reported back in Q4 that I think most consumers were very comfortable getting into a hybrid because they've been around a long time. People have got more confidence with it, and they sit in the right price bracket because of their age and mileage profile. So battery electric was maybe a little stretched too far, both financially and also conceptually, that they weren't quite ready to go into it. But I think actually with the fuel prices and prices increasing, and people looking to try and ease their sort of monthly disposable income, I think actually that's changed in the matter of the last 6 weeks, where maybe it is the right thing to do to stretch myself initially in that purchase price, but actually to save my monthly running costs and get into a battery electric vehicle. Yeah. So I think I saw an article yesterday saying that almost they felt 1 in 3 consumers are now considering a battery electric vehicle that was done at the end of Q1. And that's massive when you think about, 1 in 3 are ready to make that move. That was nowhere like that, perhaps October last year. Yeah. So, yeah, I think confidence is moving in that arena, and that's good because that's the way the market's going. As we've discussed, there'll be more and more battery electric vehicles in the market over the coming years, and obviously less and less of the combustion engines. Although I do think, and I've said before, diesel and petrol stayed fairly static, which is good. No major drops, still very, very level with diesel at sort of in that high 8,800, 8,500 area. Petrol's still in the mid to late 7s, which is good. And I do think actually as time goes on, as they become rarer in the market when they stop being registered, I do think they'll see a little lift actually, because there'll be demand for them as they're running out. Yeah. So there's no cause for great concern. And then when they've almost disappeared, then they will start to drop away. But as we're seeing, the life cycle of vehicles goes on for quite some time now. Yeah. So they've still got life in those combustion engines for quite some time to come yet.
Yeah, of course. And these vehicles are the ones that we're showing up in our report, aren't they? When we're talking about them as being dealer,
yes.
budget. For £2,000 or however much they'll be in 10 years' time.
Yes, indeed.
Carrying on then, so keeping the electric theme going a little bit there, as we begin to look at the desirability index. Just to remind the listener, the desirability index is formed using 3 key metrics. That's web views prior to a sale, the number of physical and online bids per sale, and then the sale price achieved as a percentage of cap average. We put all those into the mix and it forms a desirability index. This isn't how likely a car is to sell at auction, but it is an idea of how attractive a car is, a make and model of vehicle is to our buyers. Hyundai Ioniq for the first time features in the top spot. We always see a collection of electric vehicles in them, the top 3, but this is the first time that particular model's made it up there, probably as the volumes are making it through to auction now. It's an interesting one, isn't it? That we're now seeing BEV vehicles in that top spot regularly.
Yeah, and I think that is just purely down to what we've said, Ben. That more and more consumers are starting to become interested in them. The hybrids certainly have reached a situation where they're of a good value for retailers to be investing in, because not only are they ticking that box from a consumer, they tick the desirability of the right price range on their forecourts. And the desirability index is really interesting because it does change quite significantly month on month, quarter on quarter. And I noticed end of last quarter we did have a number of hybrid and battery electric vehicles in the top end. We had a number of Prius in there. I think we had 2 different Prius models in the top 5.
And the Tesla.
Ioniq was in there. Tesla was obviously in there. But obviously this quarter we do see some of the more prestige brands coming back in terms of Mercedes M-Class and Land Rover Evoque and Range Rover, etc. So that's quite interesting. And I do think, again, there's been so little Mercedes in the marketplace. They still are very, very desirable across the networks. And I think a number of those sort of larger SUVs seem to be desirable as well. And I know some of the medium SUVs in the last quarter have probably taken the biggest adjustment in cap, but actually they're still appearing in that desirability score. So sometimes it is just about price, but the demand is still out there, which is good news. So,
and it goes back to what we said at the start of this conversation. There's so much German product in that list there. It's, people are struggling to get that, that new Beamer or the new VW.
yes.
So they're looking to the, to the used market to serve that need.
And as we said, if they're the ones that are perhaps going to struggle the most with that new car supply, I can only see that continuing over the next 18 months as well, that those sort of badges and brands will stay high in demand as we move forward, definitely.
So there we go, Martin. That's the desirability index. It's still a pretty movable market. There's lots of things happening. Is there any advice that you've got for our buyers?
Yeah, I think over the next quarter, all I'd say to our retailers and buyers that are offering that sort of part exchange stock and our fleet and leasing finance customers is to really keep an eye on the market, because the averages are deceiving, really. So like we've said, we're expecting maybe on the 3-year 60 cap to adjust by about 2.3 on average, but actually the devil's in the detail, as I just touched on. I think some of the medium SUV market may be dropping by 4 and 5%. So it really is a mixed bag about what's moving by what percentages. So it's really important to keep a handle on what's moving by what amount in the market, because we have seen conversions dropping slightly away from where they were in the early part of the quarter. And I think a lot of that's really just down to the fact that a number of people are obviously buying cars in part exchange based on the previous quarter's data. And actually they need to be really on top, because the market's moving so fast. In order to make sure they maximise their profits on those part exchanges, they really need to keep a handle on it, because they are starting to drop, and they will have to start to offer slightly less as a cap percentage, because it has moved three months on the row, and it's looking like that will continue for the next couple of 3 months as well. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I would say keep your eye on that. Obviously the idea is still to try and convert as quickly as you can to get your cash in. So I know a number of retailers, some of the stock is becoming more over age, and their stocking plans need to be paid at sort of that 90-day level. So cash is still important to a lot of retailers. So, for us to try and help them, it's keep an eye on that market so that we can actually convert that stock much faster for you and get that cash back into your businesses. So that'd be my advice until the next time you see me on the podcast.
Sage advice as always, Martin. Thank you. Well, that takes us to the bottom of the podcast. Thank you, Martin, for taking the time to talk to us today, and thank you to the listener for joining us. You can access the full report in the show notes or by visiting our website, where you can also find out about buying and selling through Aston Barclay. You can get in touch with me at podcast@astonbarclay.net, and if you want to follow us on LinkedIn, it's at Aston Barclay Group. You can follow Martin on LinkedIn at Martin Potter. I've been Ben Crawford. You've been listening to the Aston Barclay podcast. See you next time.